Thank you so much. So I have around 20 minutes. I'm afraid my presentation hasn't landed, but I'm perfectly capable, as most parliamentarians are, of speaking for 20 minutes on what I'm supposed to do. So you just have to bear with me because the presentation isn't up on the screen. So what we're going to do is try and set the scene for where we have been in terms of the parliamentary process and regulatory process over the last 5 years since I've been involved in the industry. My background is not actually finance or tech. I was the first clinical psychologist to ever be elected to the UK Parliament, and we always still joke that my constituents thought that Westminster needed a psychologist. And having been there for 9 years over the past decade, I would agree that most parliaments probably do need a psychologist. So I arrived with a health remit. I worked pretty much through the pandemic on health, chaired the health group through the pandemic, through COVID, and also worked as a mental health spokesperson for the first part of my parliamentary career. So how do I find myself in digital assets is a good question. Round about 2021, I had a constituent who came to me and said, "You're my MP. I've lost a lot of money on a crypto scam. Could you get me some redress through the current regulatory structures and processes?" So basically, what we did was I started to look to find out what was being done in the House of Commons in 2021 on cryptocurrency digital assets. Well, we had had no debates or mentions in the House of Commons in 2021 through a debate process of cryptocurrency. So I thought to myself, perhaps my constituents' experience is out of the ordinary. And then I went to look at the research, and I was astounded to find out that in 2021, almost 4 million people in the UK were already engaged in cryptocurrency, either trading or engaged in the sector, according to the FCA figures. And so I realised that actually the people were way ahead of the Parliament in that sense, and we really needed to pick up speed and begin to learn about these new frontier technologies that were emerging. So I went back to the constituent, told him that there was no one identified as doing anything in the House of Commons. A number of the Lords had been very helpful, Lord Holmes in particular, who was starting to speak about these issues in the House of Lords, and said we really need to have more work in the Commons. So we started the very first cryptocurrency and digital assets all party parliamentary group in the House of Commons in 2021, and I was chair of that group for 4 years. We started off with a really sort of big focus on education. Education, I include myself very much on that, not having had a fintech background myself. And first of all, I went off to Zug, to Crypto Valley, courtesy of the Swiss Embassy, who were very keen that I engaged with their legislators to find out how they were beginning to put their regulatory processes together. I spent a week in Zug and realised that actually we were on the cusp of a technology revolution in globally, really, not just in the UK, and that it wasn't something we were discussing very much in the Parliament. I learned very much about the emergence of AI, that quantum was coming through, Web3, blockchain technology, and all about digital assets and the legislation that had been moving through Switzerland. So I came back with a sense of urgency and renewal, with the idea that we would upskill ourselves, begin to have debates and ask questions of ministers, which we did. And in 2021, we started our first education sessions. And the cryptocurrency sector, I would say, has much of its own kind of lingo, communication, jargon, whichever word you prefer. So we had a lot of experts coming to speak to the MPs, and I remember sitting in the room with the MPs and the Lords and some of the businesses, and different things were being mentioned, DeFi and CeFi and blockchain and Web3 and Bitcoin. And then out of the blue, someone mentioned fiat. And one of the lords said, fiat, I understand what we're discussing now, that's a car. And I realized that we had such a huge learning curve, even just to learn the financial landscape in terms of its language. So we sort of superseded ourselves and had doubled up our efforts and had many, many more sessions, upskilling ourselves so that we could even just understand when the industry came to speak to us, the terminology that they were using. We did the education sessions throughout 2021, 22. I had so many businesses come to meet with us, to meet with the parliamentarians. I remember we had an uphill struggle in our learning and in thinking about the industry itself. We even had cowboys come to the parliament, and I mean actually dressed as cowboys. And I remember coming out to the security and saying, is that someone for me that I'm waiting to meet with who owns one of the prestigious crypto businesses? And they said, yes, that's him over there. And I said, I don't think that's him. And they said, yes, it definitely is. The person that looks a bit like Kid Rock, that's the person for you. So I had to give tours around the Parliament to very colourful people who were extremely illuminating, I have to say, and great innovators, had great minds, but it was a bit out of the ordinary for what Parliament was used to. So we were all widening our perspectives a bit. Then it came to 2022, 2023. We had a number of debates in the Parliament by that point. A company called Greengage, if you look them up, did a research paper, and our APPG and myself, by the time we got to 2023, 24 in their research, from going in 2021 from having zero mentions in the Parliament on cryptocurrency digital assets. The work of our group by that point had over 200 mentions in the Parliament. So the priority was rising, because the more times things are discussed in Parliament, the more they are prioritised and the more effort and industry is put into their development by the ministers. By that point, I think the minister, the city minister, who was Andrew Griffiths at the time, was a bit sick of me lodging for debates on crypto and asking him questions, because his department had to keep going and finding out information. But I think we were all learning, and it was very, very exceptional time to take things forward. Of course, at the time, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak said that he wanted the UK to be a crypto hub. So there was also a lot of interest and excitement about the possibility of this. And in terms of the crypto hub, I began to ask companies about some of the difficulties they're experiencing. And we realized that actually it was going to be very difficult at that stage without regulation in place to have a crypto hub, because most companies in the crypto sector, digital assets and blockchain, were debanked. So they couldn't even have a bank account to pay their staff. So how could we be a hub, so to speak? We were way behind. And that's when I decided, because speaking to counterparts, we looked at where was the UK, and we looked at our education, but we hadn't actually looked about where we are comparatively to the rest of the world. So basically at that point, we started to engage with other jurisdictions. I had good engagement with VARA in Dubai, and realized that their financial authorities were balancing innovation and investment with compliance and consumer protection in a very different way than we were perhaps doing in the UK. And this was causing a stream of companies moving to the UAE at that point. And I think that that has continued as a pattern. And we see that in the news, even in the last few months, that's been reported again. So we have to, as a parliament and as parliamentarians and former parliamentarians, as I am now, continue to work on thinking about how the UK is positioned, not just in itself, but comparative to other jurisdictions. Since leaving Parliament in 2024, I told my husband, which was a bit of a misnomer, that I would be sort of winding down a bit and retiring a bit. I've never been busier. The education is really needed in the Parliament, not just because we spent a long time educating MPs, then a general election came, turfed most of them out, and now we're starting again with hundreds of new ones who want to learn. But also because things are so fast paced and changing in the sector that it's difficult sometimes to keep abreast. So in the past year, since stepping down from Parliament, I become chair of the UKUS Crypto Alliance, and we've had members of Parliament, House of Lords, out to Washington to speak with the Crypto Task Force there with Commissioner Pearce and Chair Atkins to speak about a UK-US sandbox, which has now been worked on, a joint sandbox between both treasuries. And we're very keen to take this development forward, enabling what we hope is passporting of companies in their development and progress and innovation between the jurisdictions of the UK and the US. So we had Chairman Pham out to a big dinner in Parliament in June. We have Commissioner Pearce, now that the shutdown has concluded, coming back again in February, and both treasuries are now working on this joint sandbox. And when we were in Washington just last month, there was a call out to have companies who are interested in the UK-US sandbox to be in touch. And please do get in touch with myself, with the UK-US Crypto Alliance, with your own MP as well. How many people here have been in touch with their own MP about the work they do? Can you put your hands up? Just one, two people. Yes. How did you get on? Just an email, right? So you can actually visit these people. They are real people. They have constituency surgeries. And one of the key things when you're an MP is that you really want to know which industries are developing growth, which are developing jobs, which are creating skills for the future. And you want to stay abreast of how to support that in your own constituency. So please do reach out to your member of Parliament. Is anyone in the audience involved with any of the all-party parliamentary groups in the Parliament? There's one on digital money, there's one on cryptocurrency, there's one on blockchain technology, and there's one on fintech. Anybody involved? Well, you can pretty much contact the Secretariat, look it up online, and come into the Parliament for the sessions. And please do, because the only way that this is going to work and that we can upskill ourselves is by an engagement with industry and legislators and the regulators. And these are the sessions that are now routinely being held by the all-party parliamentary groups. Throughout my time in Parliament, we had a number of regulations coming through, financial services regulations, FinProm regulations. We're now looking at the Genius Act and the Clarity Act emerging in the US, and looking at the impact of this and whether or not the UK should be pivoting towards a light touch regulatory framework, allowing the innovators to do their thing within guardrails, of course. and making sure that we, of course, have consumer protection at the core, but that we try to enable entrepreneurship, investment, growth, and innovation in the UK. So all of the work I'm doing is non-partisan. It covers all of the parties in Parliament, governing party, opposition parties, and those who are very, very interested, of course, to come through in terms of technology. And my hope with the work I'm doing is that for the next election, we will have fintech manifestos, we will have crypto manifestos from each of the parties, and digital assets manifestos, and we should be obviously further ahead in terms of the work that we're doing in our own regulatory process. I have about 4 minutes left. Interestingly, from my work in the UK Parliament, what we've been doing is also going to other parliaments. So aside from being in Washington, I was invited to speak at the Spanish Senate and to speak to their legislators about how we developed our skills in UK in relation to digital assets, technology and frontier technologies moving forward, and what they could learn and how they could collaborate. I've also been over to the European Parliament, and next year I've been invited over to speak in the Italian Parliament and the German Parliament alongside the US. And I'm just back from Singapore, which is another jurisdiction which I think is very much at the forefront of progress in this industry. So for the next year, what I want to do is make sure that the members of the Parliament and the members of the House of Lords have access to information, not just about what we're doing here, but about cross-jurisdictional progress that's being made, so that they can form an impression of where the UK is and where it needs to be, and how we need to progress the regulatory structures here to make sure that we are in a leadership position moving forward. And what I would leave you with is, in our learning, not only were we way behind on jargon, way behind on the industry itself, way behind on blockchain technology and Web3 and most of those issues in 2021. But when the Children's Parliament came to speak to us, now we have a Children's Parliament across the UK, children aged from around 7 or 8 up to 15, representing their constituencies across the United Kingdom, who come to tell us what's important to them. And when they came to speak to us in the APPG, they said that digital and skills and opportunities were at the very core of where they saw their future. When we had them in the room, and we had the children in the room, we had the lords in the room, we had the MPs in the room, and someone from Roblox, who I had actually wanted to speak to, their representative was in the room, because I spend a lot of money on Roblox because I have children, and I want to speak to this man particularly. But he asked a very pertinent question that stuck in my mind. He said, "Who in the room has heard of Web3?" So hardly any of the MPs had their hands up at this point. No members of the House of Lords, but I can tell you most of the children aged 7 up to 15 had heard of Web3, and they had their hands in the air. So not only was the Parliament behind the people and the constituencies, we were behind the children even in our learning. And this made me think, we owe it to this next generation, who are very innately digital, to make sure we get the regulatory framework in place that affords them opportunities that they've asked us for their future, because these are going to be the jobs of the future. The jobs of the future won't be like the jobs of the past. My mother said, be a doctor or be a lawyer. She never said be an MP, by the way. So, but we don't often follow what our parents say. But these children wanted us to make sure that not only in our regulation, but also in transformation of our education system, we put them at the forefront of the work in the Parliament moving forward on digital assets. So we have a lot to do. We want to do it collaboratively with yourselves. Please reach out if you're interested in the work with the USA or with any of the European parliaments, or just the learning that's ongoing in Parliament and have something to contribute. Reach out to the APPGs, reach out to myself, and please never be a stranger, because without your input, we can't make this work. And we all want to make sure that the UK thrives, especially on this budget day moving forward. We're all watching for the announcements. We need to harness that growth. We need to make sure the innovators stay in the UK, and we need to work together to create a leadership position for the UK in technology of the future moving forward. So thank you for listening to me this morning. Thank you.